Lisa Cook. Who is she? Why is he doing it? And why do you care? Who is she? What does it matter? Why is he doing it? And why do you care? Well, let me explain to you. Well, first of all, who is uh, who is Lisa Cook? Right? I mean, what's the big deal with this woman? Well, Lisa Cook is basically a governor at the Federal Reserve, and that's an important role. It's an important role because she's responsible. She decides. Well, she votes on the rates. Okay, and she's been she's been there for a while, and she's supposed to be there for much longer. And she's done something that's potentially wrong, and that could impact what's going on in the Fed. So who is this? Who is this lady? And why do you care? Well, Lisa Cook is an American economist, and she's currently serving on the board of governors of the Federal Reserve, a position she has held since 2023. And she is the first African American woman, the first woman of color to serve in that role. So she made history. And she was nominated, confirmed by President Biden in 2022, confirmed in the 2023. And her terms run until 2038 because that's how long they get appointed for. Macroeconomics, and she's a research on racial disparity. Anyway, so what's the problem, and what do you care? Well, basically, as I told you before, Trump is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the federal market open committee, and that committee, believe it or not, the composition is you've got basically you got 7 people: Jerome Powell, obviously, Philip Jefferson, Michael Barr, and Lisa Cook. They tend to be more on the Biden side because they were appointed by Biden, or they are leaning, to the left based on their decision and political inclination. What else? Well, what else is happening is Michelle Bowman, which is a Trump appointee, and Christopher Waller, which is also a Trump appointee. They recently said that they wanted to have a rate cut, and there was a vacant seat from Kruger, which also a Biden appointee, and she left. So that's 4 against 3. Now, if Lisa Cook leaves, that'd be 3 against 4. So you're going to have a great amount of rate cuts, right? Currently, what you need to understand is, but so what's going on? Well, basically, on April 15, Bill Pulte, the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency appointed by Biden, basically alleged that Cook falsely designed 2 properties, one in Michigan and another in Georgia. And as a primary residence, when she applied for mortgage in 2021, possibly to secure better loan terms. So what is she doing? Well, she basically, I mean, when you go buy a house, you say, "This is my house," and if you is it you're going to live in the house, they tell you very clearly, "Are you going to live in this house?" And if you say yes, then you get better terms. And if you get better terms, this is great. You get lower rates. And according to Bill Pulte, that's what she did. The only thing is, she didn't live in those houses. She rented them out, right? She would design 2 properties, one in Michigan, another one in Georgia, the primary, and she applied for mortgage. He referred to the matter to the Department of Justice. And basically, it would appear that she decided to simply, maybe she's renting them out, or maybe she's doing something with the houses, but she's not living in them. And obviously, Trump jumped on it and says, well, she needs to resign for cause. I mean, you're not supposed to do that. And from what I hear from Bill Pulte, she did it. And obviously, they're saying that she's not living there. Of course, it depends who's living in those houses. Is she renting them out? And obviously, she's saying, I'm not going to be bullied into this thing. I am not. I didn't mean it. I mean, Federal Reserve has denied calls from Donald Trump to resign, saying I has no intention of being bullied to step down. Trump on Wednesday demanded Cook, who became the second Fed governor in less than 1 month, to step down after Bill Pulte, head of the Federal Housing Finance and frequent critics of the central banks, called on the Justice Department to open a criminal investigation into alleged irregularity into mortgage applications. The allegations against Cook, whose term runs in 2038, are the latest in a multi-pronged attack by the Trump administration. Now, this is part of a bigger topic, but basically they want him out. He recently fired the Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner, and yes, Trump has called on Powell to resign, and it would appear that this is a way to really push these people out. Now, why is he doing it? Why is Trump doing that? Why is he actually want to remove these? Because he's got these seven people that are going to decide the rates. In fact, Powell is talking today to figure exactly very soon as to what he's going to do with rates. That's going to impact you, right? Because it would appear that although it's like an 80% chance that they're going to lower those rates, it's a possibility that doesn't happen because, frankly, there's some issues with the what's going on with the rates. Should a president interfere with an independent organization such as the Fed? Well, technically, the Fed is supposed to be independent, but if they're doing things that are nefarious and they could be fired for cause, then he has the right to ask her he wants her to leave or to be fired for cause. Right? You can't do anything illegal, obviously. And they're saying, well, you did something illegal, so that's why I'm messing out with you. Although, yes, that's true, but we know what the point is. And he's being very methodical about it. Remember, there's 7 people that are going to decide those rates in September. 7, including the Fed chair. And out of the 7, they're being very methodical, I will tell you that. And I tell you, I did tell you in my previous live that the pressure is on. And not just on the Fed chair himself, he's pressuring all 7. So out of the 7 people, we have Michelle Bowman and Christopher Waller, which he appointed, and obviously they want rate cuts. And one of the lady left, Kugler. She was also a Fed governor. So and she left. Frankly, she just didn't vote, and she went back to teaching, and she quit before her terms was due, and she didn't even vote the last time around. And when I heard that, I said, well, that's interesting. Okay, maybe they were looking into what she was doing. Maybe she didn't want to talk about it. Maybe she wanted things to be brought. Who knows, right? So she quit, literally. So now out of the 7, 3, because he's replacing her with someone of his choosing, obviously someone that's going to be leaning to rate cuts, and he should be in by the time the new Fed, the governors meet again in September. So now it's 3 versus 4. But now they're, quote unquote, going after Lisa Cook. And if that works, it's going to be 4 on the Trump side versus 3. And then the sky is the limit. This is very important. This is very important because if they get what they want, and usually they do, because they don't stop, in the case of this lady, she probably did the thing that she said she did, because you can't, they can invent it, right? Basically, you go, you sit down, they tell you, are you going to live in this house? Yes. Okay, then you get the 4% rate. Because if you don't, that's going to be 8%, and you have to put 30% down. I exaggerate, but that's basically what it is. So what she did is, it's a very easy thing to do. I've been there many times when I used to own properties. You sit there, say, is this your primary residence? Yeah. So Yeah, there was a Calera says that I hear there's 100 million in bonds, and he's trying to drop the rate, um, so he'll make a whole bunch of money with that. Correct. Um, I don't know who has $100 million in bond is trying to drop the rate. So, I mean, I don't know what you're referring to specifically, but obviously, if rates go down and you own bonds, the value of the bonds is going to go up for obvious reason. Um, so, what do we care about this lady? I mean, what's the big deal? Well, you care about it because if they go after her, and if they say no, 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 you did, and usually it's clear cut. You can't mess it up. Now, of course, she could have reasons. She says no. I said I was going to live in the house, but this is not your permanent resident. You cannot have three houses, right? So what's your permanent resident? Well, all three. That's going to be difficult. Unfortunately, it's very easy. It's very easy to say, "Is this your primary residence?" Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's it. That's it. They don't ask you to show proof or anything. Of course, they could go back later on, and and they could go back and take a look at it, and then they realize, you really didn't do that. I think that what you said that you did, you may have done it because they could look at it. Um, and Ed Martin, a senior DOJ official, penned a letter to Fed Chair Jerome Powell urging Cook's immediate removal from the board. He asserted the case requires further examination. However, legally, Powell lacks authority to fire a Fed governor. And she's refusing to step down. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board condemned the pressure campaign as politically motivated lawfare, warning it undermines the Fed independence. Well, yes, it does, because you're really going after the Fed, but at the same time, he's highlighted some things that, frankly, are not so good. Right? I mean, the building is one thing. I guess you could say everybody does it, and you overspend on the building, and you didn't look at it, and now they're going after her. They say, well, this, and I'm pretty sure, somebody said, go and look at all these people, and I want you to find anything at all, anything, pressure them. And the pressure seems to be working because one of the Fed actually governor quit. I mean, she left earlier, and she didn't even vote. She didn't say why. She went back to teaching. She said, "Leave me alone. I don't want to deal with it. That's crazy." Now she, on the other hand, as a fighter, uh, she's going to have to do. It is not good for the president to interfere with the Fed Reserve monetary policy decision. They debunked him over spending on the building that they were including stuff from something that was completed 5 years ago in the total. I know. I mean, but the thing that's the approach. The approach is and it's the same approach that you're seeing with the tariffs. It's the same approach you're seeing with the comment yesterday that basically said that if you're going to be somebody's attacking you, maybe you should attack them at home. Basically, telling Ukraine to attack Russia at home. Whoa, are you really? I mean, I don't know if you should be saying things like that because they're actually going to do it. No, the point is for this is very important because now, depending what she actually did, and if she actually did do that, she's going to have to show that she actually is living in those houses. This is a primary residence. But trust me on that, the odds are it's going to be very difficult to prove that you live in two houses and in a house at the same time, Okay, so you probably lied, and that happens to quite a bit of people, and you could say, well, I didn't realize. Okay, fine. Now, does this rise to the level of to be fired for cause? That is a question. Is this a really, really bad thing? Or is this just a thing? Now, of course, this is important because right now, as we're speaking, the Fed chair is actually talking, and he's discussing the economy and the central bank rating framework. And he's opening doors to a rate cut. And obviously, the market is reacting to this. This is extremely important because the market is saying is overvalued and it needs a rate cut. It is bad precedence, but that's who was hired, who was elected. And did the Trump flip flop on the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Well, he basically He basically said to Ukraine, maybe you should attack Russia because I can't get through these people. It's not going to work. Why don't you attack them directly at home? So I don't know if it's flip flopping, but it's definitely going a different direction. So right now, the Dow, the market is going up because the Fed is saying that he's opening the door. Because what's happening in the economy right now, and this all ties together, and I want you to be informed what the way all this is tying together is in terms of employment. The unemployment is 4.2%, which is unchanged, which is good. It's consistent with recent stability. The non-farm payroll rose, but it's really in healthcare and social assistance. Okay, so that's okay, but that's not that great. Labor participation rate and employment remain steady, but long-term joblessness, unemployed for the number of individual unemployed for 27 weeks or more increased to 1.8 million, which is almost 25% of the unemployed. There's rising continuing claims signal a potential uptick in employment to 4.3%. So it would appear that unemployment is starting to rise very slowly. And based on what I see from my people, I could tell you that it's difficult to get a job right now, a little more difficult than last year. So the rates are going up. I mean, the time it takes you to get a job, unemployment is not going up so much because don't forget, a lot of people left the workforce because they were asked to leave the country, quite frankly. So the unemployment, but the job creation is a lot less. Okay, and what's happening is there is a concern that at the same time that the employment is kind of weakening, the consumer price index rose 2.8% over year in July, the highest reading since February. So they're saying, aha, right? I told you that this inflation, this tariff is going to cause inflation. Yeah. And then what? Does it mean that you're not going to lower rates because of the inflation of 2.8%? It's going up, and the concern is going to keep going up and up and up over the next, because now we're seeing the impact of the tariffs. Is this really what's happening? Are you sure? Right? Because in terms of core inflation, it's near the Fed target, and 2.8%. It's not that it's higher than it was, but it's not that bad. Okay, but right now the odds and the market is hanging on this. And if they, I mean, tell you right now, if it doesn't lower those rates in September, the market is going to crash because it's waiting for any reason because it's overvalued right now. In fact, a couple of days ago, the chat GPT guy went out and said, well, maybe we're paying too much for it's a little bit too expensive for the AI stocks, and the market just dropped. Not the entire market. When I say the market, the S&P, the Dow Jones was kind of steady. Again, as I tell my members all the time, make sure you get into small caps. Don't get too bothered with a high company. But anyway, so what we have is Lisa Cook, who happens to be, of course, she's a distinguished American economist and currently serves at the board of governors for the Federal Reserve. She was the first African American woman and the first woman of color to serve on that role. So now you're going after. That's be careful. Make sure you got your ducks in a row. And obviously, this guy does, because on August 15th, the head of the federal housing. So I mean, they've got they got the data. Okay, it's not like they're imagining or lying. They allege that Cook falsely designated two properties, one in Michigan and one in Georgia, are primary residence, as she applied for mortgages into 2021. So you buy two houses at the same time, and you're going to live in both of them at the same time, possibly to better loan terms. So they're going to have to refer to, what did you mean when you said this is my present residence? Are you living in both houses? Are you divorced? Are you separated? I mean, are you having some business thing I mean, at the end of the day, you could probably make a case that you have two houses and whatever else. The thing is, if you're sure that you lied, she's going to have to explain herself very well. Now, of course, right away they say, no, I will not. It's like when the Canadian Prime Minister says, no, I do not. I will fight Trump, and you'll see Canada first, blah blah blah, and he kind of whizzled away very quickly because Trump said, "I'm not listening to you. I'm going to do what I want to do," and that's the end of that. So maybe that could happen. That now, if that happens, then the Fed is going to have to cut rates because she's going to be out, and then they're going to put someone in her place. And but even now, Fed chair is saying he lower rates, and he's going to have to lower the rates because if he doesn't lower the rates, somebody like me could say, "Well, hold on. I'm looking at the employment snapshot here, and non-farm payroll is only raising because of people in healthcare and social assistance. The labor force participation is dropping. In May and in June and in July, the number of added jobs were very small. They were like 19,000, 17,000. These are small job addition. There's something happening with in the employment situation. What's happening? Well, it looks like it's weakening a little bit. Why? Well, don't forget the tariffs are impacting industrial business, and industrial it is will be huge next month because we have different people finding the numbers now. Yes, these people are going to decide, are going to impact you, and I hope you understand that, because I tell you right now, if in September and inflation goes up tick, which is going to be probably is going to happen a little bit. Although keep in mind that this tariff inflation business is highly, highly, highly docked and politicized, and it's more. They're not telling you everything that they tell you. They tell you some truth, but not all the truth, right? They tell you the truth that's convenient. For example, you keep hearing, "Oh, the tariffs are not good for the economy." Well, hold on. First of all, the tariffs are only impacting industries, right? Not the finance sector, not the services. And the U.S. is 80% services, so that's not impacting anything, right? 20% is being impacted, and it's only and industrial is about 10% of the stock market. So let's not get too carried away, right? It's not such a big deal. But at the end of the day, that's what they're looking at. They're saying, you know what? We're concerned about the economy. We're concerned about what's going on. You should do something. Let's do something. So let's lower the rates. Well, okay, but keep one thing in mind. You lower those rates, and don't forget, this thing is not just like you flip a switch back and forth, right? You lower those rates. The impact is going to be felt a year to 12 to 16 months from now. That's right. It takes that long for it to happen. So then, what do you do if rates, if you have inflation, right? Because that was a concern that you lower rates, and then you have inflation at the same time. You're going to boost that inflation even more. Why? Because everything becomes cheaper to buy, to finance, and then inflation goes up, stuff is getting more expensive, then you borrow money to buy those expensive stuff, and it keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher. And the higher it gets, the worse it is. Well, outside of the other, it doesn't care whether someone is part of a special ed group like African. Well, I mean, I don't think it's. I don't think it's a. I don't think it has nothing to do with that. I think they're just looking through the list of all those 7 people and said, "Find me something." The same way probably he went to a bunch of people and say, in the White House and said, "You know what? I want you to tell me, find me places in the world where I could create peace because I want the, um, I basically want to make sure I get the Nobel Peace Prize. So what we're going to do is you're going to simply go out and find me a couple of countries where I could create peace." And that's what he did. He created peace. But now, of course, he wants peace with Ukraine, and that's a little bit more difficult to get because these people cannot possibly agree on anything. So the question is this: are we going to have lower rates come September? Are we going to be able to buy a house cheaper? Are we going to be able to buy, if you want to buy a car, anything, is it going to be cheaper? And is inflation going up? The question to both of those, in fact, let me ask you that question. And hopefully you don't answer it the way I think you're going to answer, because then, are we going to see lower rates in September? Because because it's coming. Ah, sorry. I have to put that in a poll format. Okay. September, I meant, obviously. Okay. Let's see if we're going to have lower rates in September. That's the first thing. Okay. Um, and also, then I'm going to ask you, do you see 100% are saying yes right now, 100%, and okay, great, fantastic, but are we going to also have inflation? If you say yes, if you feel that prices are going up and you want higher rates, lower rates, and you have inflation, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for big, big trouble because you cannot have both. In 1980, that's exactly what happened. In 1980, the Fed I mean the 70s actually before the 80s, the 70s, the Fed lowered the rates and there was inflation, and the president at that time, Nixon, told his guys, said, listen, lower the rates. We need lower rates. He said, well, we have inflation. Don't worry, but lower rates is good for the stock market, so it's good for the economy, and blah, blah, blah. And guess what happened? Huge amount of inflation, huge amount. So in 1980, they brought in the new Fed chair, Paul Volcker, and he raised those rates to 12, 13, 14%. He killed the economy, created a huge amount of recession, but at least there was no more inflation. That is what you're looking at. That is what you should be concerned about, because we're heading there very slowly but surely. And um, now, when we say inflation, right? I mean, there's the tariffs and there is inflation. Take a look at my video on that. But basically, the point that I was making is the CPI is driven by really three things. The first, it's housing. Second is energy, and then third is food. That's what they're measuring. They're not measuring the tariff you're paying. That GM is paying 50% tariffs from importing aluminum from India. Let's say they don't measure that because that's two different things. Two different things, and as such, what's going to happen is you're gonna be in a situation where very slowly you're being walked into lower rates, higher stock market, and potential inflation, right? Because the inflation itself, food, for example, is going to start to be impacted, but the prices. Now, of course, it takes time. How is food impacted? Well, I mean, although right now the Walmart of the world and the Target of the world are keeping prices down because they don't want to take advantage of the situation. But the stuff that they're getting from everywhere is going up slowly. Takes a while. Don't forget when we say 50%. Was it 50% tariff on India? Well, you don't have 50% tariff technically until the end of August. 35% tariffs on Canada, I think. Well, but technically you don't have 35% because 80% of the stuff that's coming from Canada is still protected by the North American trade agreement that they have between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. So all this is just hearsay talk. So most people, like us, unless you join this channel and you listen and you're trying to understand, you're getting lots of bits of information, and but they're telling you, what you want to hear. Like, for example, when I see this article that talks about the mortgage fraud for that lady, right? The way it is being worded. For example, they basically, what did they say? U.S. Department has called the Federal Reserve to be removed in the last stage escalation of the Trump administration assault on the central bank. Did you have to use that word? I guess he's assaulting the central bank. Well, because they're so pure and they're so great, and they shouldn't be mess with. Well, I mean, I will tell you one thing. The greatest economist, Friedman, basically said that he doesn't believe in the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve should not have that amount of control over the economy. All they should do is they should manage the money supply. When there's not enough money, put more money. When there's not enough, remove the money, and that's all you should be doing. You should not be involved with the setting the rates. You shouldn't be involved with managing employment. The mandate of employment, and the mandate of inflation. These are, you should let the market forces deal with this. I mean, yeah, if you know what you're doing, it's great. But in 2021, after COVID, it was happened to be a Democratic administration. What did they do? They didn't do anything. The inflation was going up. They didn't lower the rates because they say, well, it's going to be transitory. It's not going to stick around. And then they realize, why aren't you raising the rates? The inflation is going up. Oh, then they did it. But it was a bit too late. So, and they admitted it was a mistake. So these people make mistakes. They could be a bunch of PhDs, but you cannot take anyone at face value. Now, is this an assault? Do they deserve to be assaulted? No. But they don't deserve to be assaulted, but they deserve to be. We have to question the situation. We have to question what is it that's actually happening. Are you guys actually doing something that we should be worried? In 2008, where was the Federal Reserve? Remember that the Fed chairman in the 80s and 90s and in 2000, up to the financial crisis, that Fed chair basically his view was that you need to let the market be the market, right? He was a believer in that. He was a believer in saying that the market needs, so basically let the banks do what they want to do, let the market do what they want to do because it will self-correct. Well, that was the biggest mistake. In fact, they brought him, right? They brought him after the 2000 financial crisis, which they missed completely missed it. They brought him in front of Congress and say, what the heck happened? I mean, didn't you see? Well, the mistake I made is I trusted the banks to do what was good for their shareholders. No, you're not supposed to trust them. You're supposed to make sure that they don't do it. And then there was a situation like 2 years ago with SVB, the banks that they weren't monitoring. Their assets was often the liabilities. And I'm sure people like the president and the governor and people in the know, they realize, oh my God, these guys are getting away with murder, right? They got away with it. And it was so bad in 2008, that's when they decided to come up with the Bitcoin. Where do you think Bitcoin came from? Right? Because essentially, because the power of the purse, they can simply print more money. They could do whatever they want because they have the dollar as a currency, as a reserve. So they could do anything they want. They could keep printing more money. They have a tremendous amount of power. And they've got it wrong. So you can't just say, oh, it's a Federal Reserve. Don't let them be. Obviously, no, they haven't been correct for many times. And especially when it counted the most, they were not there. So now everyone is watching and everyone is saying, be careful. And it's a tough job, I will tell you. But what you should just let the market be the market and let the rates set themselves as opposed to you trying to get into the middle of it. Because right now I'm telling you what's happening is the talk is, well, it would appear that the market is weakening. Let me see if he's saying Dow Jones gains at Fed Chair Powell's open the door for rate cut. Speaking at Jackson Hole gathering, Jerome Powell says balance of risks appear to be shifting, right? So U.S. stocks are surging Friday after Federal Reserve Chairman opened the door as soon as a meeting next month. Speaking, Powell said it risks that inflation will continue rising, but that the labor market will keep weakening. So if he has a choice, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep people employed or you want to control inflation? Because they're going to say, but why do we have inflation if people don't have jobs? Who's buying what then? They say, well, no, nobody's buying. It's the tariffs that are causing the inflation. Well, the balance, some economists are saying it is not as simple as that. Yes, you could use it because politically it's easier to say that, but is it really what's happening? Okay. Um, the Fed chairs face intense pressure from the Trump administration to slash borrowing costs. Many investors have expected the Fed cut next month, and that's the problem because now, because of the expectation, investors are saying, "Okay, well, the market is going to go down. That's going to be great. We're going to have lots of lower rates, and the market is going to go up, right?" What do you mean you're not lowering the rates? Oh, forget it then, and then you have a market crash. I mean, the market indices jump 1% today. Today. The Dow Jones is up 600 points. The Nasdaq up 284 points. And of course, there is a tremendous amount of pressure on the Fed right now. Why is there a tremendous amount of pressure? Because right now, if he doesn't lower the rates, they're going to say now you're politically motivated because they could just point to the fact that there's weak demand. And in fact, he is saying it himself. The labor market will keep weakening. He called the combination of unusual and suggested it could prompt the Fed to support economic growth. Like, it's unusual. Yeah, it's unusual, obviously, to have a price going up when nobody's got a job. Who's buying this stuff? This is crazy. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see more and more of this, more and more of a situation where, frankly, there's going to be a lot of issue, I think. Now, is this going to continue? We shall see, right? I can't tell you for sure, but I will tell you that there's going to be that story doesn't end well, unfortunately, because you have this story, right? Um, and Trump rocks. Yeah, you have this story, which you're gonna get your lower rates, and don't forget, he doesn't give up. The administration does not give up. They want lower rates; they're gonna get those lower rates. Um, they have that, but then they say, but why is this inflation going up? Now, of course, when we say inflation, right, what are we really talking about? Well, CPI, and CPI is really the housing, it's the energy, but energy, frankly, is down, and then food. Okay, food is going up, but remember, we're talking 2.8%. Okay, let me show you something. Okay, 2.8%. Well, that's bad. Well, you need to educate. You need to understand what's happening. Right? Is 2.8% inflation high versus the entire world? Right? Let's compare inflation everywhere. Is this a big deal? Okay. Not really. The United States, which is 2.8%, now it's above the 2% target that the Fed has. But frankly, the Eurozone is at 2.4. United Kingdom is at 3.1. Japan is 2.2. Canada 2.6. But you got Turkey at 52%. Argentina over 100%. Russia 8%. India 4.7%. So, 2.8% ain't that bad. So let's put everything in perspective. Let's put also under perspective the fact is when you're looking at the tariffs, you know which type of companies are hit with tariffs, right? Are hit with tariffs. And I will tell you that the companies that depend on cross-border trade. I'm insistent on that because it's about automakers, electronics, machinery, apparel, appliances, right? We're not talking services here. And services 80% of the US economy. 80%. You're only hitting the 20% right here. Oh, but it's going up. Oh, yeah, okay, but it's 20%. In the stock market, industrials, all these things that you're talking about, electronic machinery, is only 10% of the S&P in the market. So you have to be very careful that this thing is well controlled and you understand what's happening, because otherwise you think that everything is going to the tanker. Like, for example, people are not coming to the U.S. anymore. Well, first of all, 90% of the money in tourism comes from the U.S. itself. Yes, Canada doesn't like the U.S. anymore. But that's apart from Canada, on average, numbers are like down 3%. So at the end of the day, depending where you want to look at this, but the U.S. is doing great. How could they be doing great? The administration is coercing, is pushing all these people. Is going to start a war or something, or blah, blah. Well, understand the facts first, right? Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're pushing very hard to get the Ukraine or whatever. But right now, the economy in the U.S. is at 3%. The inflation is not is okay. Unemployment is 4%. That's low. These are pretty good numbers. No, but you're not seeing what's happening after. Okay, well, we've been waiting since April, and right now we are not really seeing it. They will say people are not going to come to the U.S. anymore. They're going to do other things. Well, it's not happening at this point. I mean, not to such an extent that it's bothering anyone. The point of the matter is this: you cannot avoid the U.S. The U.S. is 25% of GDP. No, right now. I'm not saying 10 years from now, because there's a slow descent. Right now, Chinese biotech companies are doing much better, are growing much faster than US biotech, by the way. So the Chinese are not just making sneakers anymore. This is way beyond. This is becoming a very modern society. And they also want to spend money and make money as well. So the point is, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is you're going to have potential inflation, and that's going to be a problem, because by that time you've got the rates all the way down, because frankly they're going to pressure this lady and they're going to have her quit. And don't forget, by next year the Fed chair himself is out, right? So he's going to be gone. He is going to be gone. 56% says no. Really? No rate cut? Well, that's a problem. Well, that's a good thing technically for some people at the Fed, because most of them right now feel that they're being pressured into lower the rates. And if they don't lower that rate, well, the market is, because it's not just the president that's pressuring them and the administration, the stock market is pressuring them. Look what's happening right now. The market is up. The Fed chair is under intense pressure from the Trump administration. That is true. You shouldn't feel, because even Russia is under pressure too, and India, and all these people are under pressure. So it's not, don't feel like you're special. But at the end of the day, how far is it going to go? That's the question. And but it's also under pressure from the stock market. Look what the stock market is doing right now. The stock market is up 1% because all the Fed had to say is, you know what? Maybe we should consider Hey, Dill, Democrats. So that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to understand what's going to happen next, because what is this channel really about? Well, this channel basically is doing one thing and one thing only. It is looking for black swan. It is looking for what we think is going to impact us in the future. Try to understand what's happening. Try to get a feel in the world that we're living in right now. And right now, they're after Lisa Cook. Right now, they're after Lisa because what Lisa did, she's one of the 7 governors that vote on new rates. That's a big job. She's supposed to be in that job until 2034. But what she did, and when she had a mortgage, she got 2 houses. When is it? 2021, 4 years ago. That didn't happen. Let me double check my facts because I want you to be totally informed. Yeah, in 2021. So they went to look for this thing. I tell you right now. So in 2024, 2021, she basically bought 2 houses and she said, "Yeah, this primary residence. Give me the lowest possible." And in 2021, the rates were quite low. Right? So she got like 2%, 3%, some ridiculous amount. They say, "Great, get your percentage," and that's what happened. But you can't do that because you cannot say you're going to. And it's a very easy thing to say. I remember I did it many times. I bought a bunch of houses. And what you do is you say, "Yes, I live in the house." Oh, then it's 3% rate. What if I don't live? Well, then it's, and I asked at one point, how do you know? Well, they could always check, and they do if they want to. And there's like 5 to 6% people, I think, that actually do that, and they go after them, and because it's illegal to do that. Up to 30 years in jail and $1 million. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount. Nobody actually gets that, but it's a. So she's gonna have to prove that no, I'm living in those houses because I am pretty sure that what they said that it's true. Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, listen, they got to do what they have to do to lower those rates because they believe that the rates needs to be lower. Now, of course, that makes total sense because when you look at the employment snapshot, well, the last time around, some of the numbers weren't good. Now, remember what happened with that lady again from BLS that he fired because the numbers weren't good. They said, well, he didn't like the numbers, so he fired her. Well, I mean, they made a couple of mistakes, and big mistakes, actually. She made the mistakes in 2024 when she said that they were off by like 800,000 job creation. Okay, and that came in just before the elections. So basically, they looked like Biden was creating lots of jobs up until August, and they say, "Oops, sorry, no, it's not one. It's you have to remove 800,000." He says, "Really, people already made up their mind. You give the impression that Biden was good for the economy when in fact you had less." And that mistake was statistically significant. I mean, that's a very unusual mistake. Now, of course, what they're telling you, and that's what you need to be aware. They're telling you, no, the reason we made the mistakes is because now to get those numbers, how do we know how many jobs we created? How do we know? Well, we go out and we survey. So people don't answer the surveys anymore. Okay. What else? And now she also made the same mistake in May, in June, and in July. And in May and June, the numbers were like 150,000. This is no, it's not 150,000. It's like 19,000 actually created. Wow. Another mistake. Well, again, because people don't answering. And what else? And quite frankly, you also fired a bunch of federal employees, and it's making it more difficult for us to do our job. So I don't know. The jury is out. Did she do on purpose? Probably not. Was she responsible? Probably not. I mean, at the end of the day, it's very difficult. I mean, imagine they go to 30,000 people. They got a survey. The thing is, he used that opportunity to put his guy in, and his guy is completely with him. In fact, he says we shouldn't really rely on the numbers, and we shouldn't report that numbers that often. So now you don't get to see the numbers anymore, and that's a different topic altogether. The point is, this thing is permeates through the entire administration. They are being very very vocal. They're pushing. They're tugging. They're doing everything they can to get this thing through. And as long as they get it through, that's all they care about. And that's what they want to do. And that's fine. It's just that make sure that you keep pushing and you're pushing in the right direction. Like for example, what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, right? They keep pushing on having a peace deal. But Ukraine does not want peace. At least not at the expense of losing 20% of the territories and maybe even more. And Russia does not want armies between them and Russia. They want their own. They don't want any of that. So it's a strategy. Now, is it going to work? Is the strategy going to work? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if what happens. We'll see if it works. We'll see how much of that becomes of interest to anyone. But if you're wrong, you could create a war here, and you could create an economic disaster on the other end because if rates go down, and you are and you have inflation, although it doesn't appear that inflation seems to be a humongous issue, right? But the more people talk about it, it becomes a very contentious point. So we shall see what happens. Okay, everyone. See you.